You make no friends in the pits and you take no prisoners. 1 minute you're up 500,000 in soybeans and the next, boom.
Do not attempt to adjust your device.
The revolution starts now.
We have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Turn those machines back on!
You are about to enter the halls of justice.
Show me the money!
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.
This is the halls of justice. He is your host, Justice.
Welcome to a live session of today's big program. So something that came across my news feed earlier today, and I got a hold of the Fat Man. I'm like, we got to go live. We got to do something here because this really hits home when people start attacking either our military or our law enforcement. And before we jump into this, let's say hello to the Fat Man who's out there. Things sound a little different. We had to go back in technology, but hey, Fat Man, how are you?
I was actually having a good day. Everything was going well at my real job. You know, I got a hockey game on, and then all of a sudden you call me and say, we've got a first class alert. We've got to get on the air about this. And I hurried up and started looking at the news. And here's what the thing that ruined the day, not so much we have one thing to talk about, is we'd actually have three things to talk about. If we had enough time, there's three things that are going on that really, really need attention. And we'll talk, next week about the other two. But let's get right into this one that's got you so fired up.
Yeah, I'm a little fired up because the House and the Senate reintroduced the Ending Qualified Immunity Act to remove qualified immunity from the police. So Democrats in both the House and Senate have reintroduced this legislation, which would end qualified immunity. And what that does is that puts police officers in the crosshairs of continual personal lawsuits why they try to do their jobs. So this Ayanna Pressley from Massachusetts in the House, and, of course, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren in the Senate have sponsored the Ending Qualified Immunity Act. Now, if it's enacted, the bill is going to abolish the legal protections from all law enforcement officers from personal lawsuits originating out of their on-duty conduct. Now, what we have to do is we have to think about this. So these people want to say that police officers should be held accountable for racism, for abuse, for brutality, and we completely agree with that. What qualified immunity is, for those of you who don't understand, it lets police officers effectively do their jobs by saying, hey, Barney Fife, if you go out there and you do your job according to all your department's rules and regulations, according to all of your state's codes and statutes, and you're not infringing on anybody's rights, and you make an arrest with somebody, they cannot turn around and sue you personally. You're immune to that. You've done everything right according to the book, so you're safe. You've made your arrest, or you had your encounter, whatever it is. It's over now, and Joe drug dealer wants to come back and sue you saying that you did something inappropriate. So then what do? You go to the videotape. Almost every officer, almost every department has some sort of body cam, cruiser cam, audio cam. You go to that, and if they go through that and they say, okay, everything's good here, everything's good here, everything's good here, then you're good to go. You're not going to be sued personally. Personally, that means money out of a police officer's pocket, money out of their family's pockets, money out of their pension. So you're not going to be sued that. So what these Democrats want to do is they want to take this away from people. You probably don't know it, but judges also have qualified immunity. You can never sue a judge. Think about that. No matter what you think the verdict is, if he issues a warrant that even maybe have an error on it, you can never go back and sue a judge because he has qualified immunity. It's the same protection to police officers that let them do their job comfortably, thinking, as long as I do everything by the book, I'm a good officer, I'm not getting myself sued, and we're good to go. But these Democrats who we spoke about, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Pressley, want to introduce this bill, and now it's the Democrat supermajority So this was shot down last year before the big flip. But now they have reintroduced this, and Fat Man, this has me worried. This straight up has me worried, as it should every law-abiding citizen in the country. This has me shaking a little bit.
The late, great Rush Limbaugh used to always say, liberalism always accomplishes the exact opposite of its stated intent. This is the exact thing he was talking about. Last summer, of course, it got a lot of publicity, and rightfully so, George Floyd. I know a lot of people in law enforcement. I have friends, I have family in law enforcement. Every single one of them, and upwards of a dozen people, I'm not talking one or two people, upwards of a dozen people in law enforcement, to a man and woman, they all said what happened to George Floyd was wrong. Now, they've introduced with George Floyd that drugs were playing a role in whatever, but even with that in it, they all said that knee never should have been on that man's back for that long, regardless of what happened with drugs. So when that happened, you had so many people on board saying, we've got to do something about this. It's not the problem that's sometimes portrayed in the media, but we've got to be able to do this better. You hear me say that phrase a lot on this program, is we've got to do better. We've got to do better with bonding communities with police forces. We've got to do better with, policing the police, making sure we've got 99%, good police officers, let's try to get that to 99.5. Whatever the numbers are, let's try and do better, and let's bridge that gap between communities who don't sometimes think the police are doing the right things, and let's get those bad cops out of there. So instead of looking to bridge those gaps and to fill in those gaps, what the Democrats do is they overreact and they pander to their radical base, and that's how you get where we are right now with something like this. If you're in law enforcement, why would you continue? Because if you do something wrong, and think about the standards that we've been establishing over the last several years, not just over the last several months and weeks since Biden and Harris have taken over, but the standard that we have been establishing over the last couple of years. It's no longer innocent until proven guilty. It's guilty, proven innocent, but you're still guilty. If that's the standard that can be applied, if somebody just makes an accusation and it has to be true, look at the Kavanaugh hearings. If somebody just makes an accusation and that's enough, what if that's the standard that now becomes what you accuse a police officer? And again, this is in no way saying that every police officer, is perfect, that they never do anything wrong. We're not talking about a across the board hold harmless, where no matter what a police officer does, they never get there's never any ramifications for it. We're talking about if somebody does something wrong, just like the average citizen, then they have to pay the price. But this is now where, if, like you said, Joe the drug dealer or Billy the robber or whoever it is, if they just go, well, that guy was a little too rough with me. That guy beat me up. He hit me too hard. I know I attacked him, but he fought back, and I was only like pushing, but he punched me. So he went too far. And what's going to happen, municipalities and police departments aren't going to have the money to fight the lawsuit, so they're going to settle. So instead of maybe losing $1 million in a lawsuit, they'll just settle for $100,000.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to happen. And then the problem is now the officer themselves, they're going to lose their houses. They're going to lose their savings. They're going to lose their pensions, retirements, because all that's if you start getting sued, all that's on the table. And the fact on the cherry on the top of this is if you're going to take it away from the police officers, I looked at the bill, why aren't you taking it away from the judges?
Right. So here's something, and it's already been going on. A lot of people probably don't know, is every city has insurance that they pay for the police department, fire department, street department, whatever. So like you said, more often than not, nowadays, when a lawsuit is brought against a police department, if it's a substantial lawsuit, it is easier for them to say, the deductible's $250,000. It's easier for them to say, How about Joey Bag of Donuts drug dealer? We give you $250,000 and you sign off on the lawsuit that you won't refile it, and we call it a day. The city doesn't fight it. It would end up costing them less just to pay out what the insurance deductible pays, and both parties go on their way. Because at the end of the day, that's what the Joey Bag of Donuts drug dealer wants. But as you said, now, if the city doesn't fight it and they settle it, then how are you going to word that doesn't look bad for the officer saying, well, the city didn't want to fight it because they didn't think they could defend it, so now here we are in civil court. So that's where it's going. And another thing that I'm going to give you a heads up right now you need to watch out for is when they try this Derek Chauvin, he's the one that knelt on George Floyd's neck. Before I get to that, let's say that from what I've heard from my law enforcement friends is there's nothing a good cop hates more than a bad cop. All right? So at first observation, what Derek Chauvin did looked horrible. But what if kneeling on somebody's neck as a form of control was how he was trained? Was the departmental standard? Was the department training? What would you say if I told you that was the case? And now he's arrested for murder, which the guy was compliant. It should have never gone that long. I'm not saying what he did was right. So let's not even make that mistake because I don't agree with what he did. One of those other officers should have said, hey, man, get off him. It's good now. But what happens when it comes out in court that was their training and he followed the training? What happens then?
Well, what would happen now is the blame or the culpability would fall away from the officer, and they would have to go back to the training. But, to me, that's one of those things. Now you're going to get into, okay, what does it say in the training manual? Is 3 seconds or 4 seconds to get control acceptable, but 9 seconds is too much? But I think that's the important thing in that specific case, and maybe we should steer away from that just because it's a topic that we could spend the next hour on. But right. I think the part of that was, I think control was demonstrated, at least in the video. Now the video isn't all conclusions. It doesn't give you a complete conclusion because there's some angles that you really can't see what all went on in that video. But to what we saw, and that's why you have a trial, but to what we saw, control was there. They had the man under control, and he never, and I'm sure police officers hear that a lot. Oh, I can't breathe. Well, if you're talking, you can breathe. And I think it was just a case of because he went so long. But that would put a different spin on it if that's the policies. But again, even if the policy tells you X is okay, there's, let's just say use specifically a chokehold. If you can use a chokehold, well, do you use a chokehold to get control and to the point where somebody passes out and then you keep it on them another 3-4 minutes just for safety's sake? No, you don't. Right. So that's where I think the problem in that case is going to be is how long he did it.
9 minutes is too long. 9 minutes is entirely too long. Once the subject is compliant, you've got to be done. And if you're so tunnel visioned and amped up that you can't see that he's under control, then any one of those other 3 officers should have said, hey, I got this, take a breath, walk away or whatever. Because I heard people yelling on the video. Hey, get off him. He can't breathe, and he, at that point, I don't know. I haven't seen the entire video back to back to see exactly what all the resisting was that led up to him being on the ground. But I did see the 9 minutes, which looked horrible, of that officer kneeling on his neck. And many times through that, I said to myself, if that were me, if I were a police officer, I wouldn't still be on his neck. So I get the uproar, and if he broke training, then he was charged with murder, and he deserves to stand trial for that. You face the consequences, I guess is what I'm saying. I'm having a Biden moment here. But again, so we're deviating from where we started, and as you said, we could spend hours talking about that. So you said and I wanted to make this fairly quick. You said you had a couple other things you wanted to talk about, so let's go ahead and get to that.
Well, I don't want to go too much into detail because of what's, we can save some of it for next week. But not only that what you're talking about is part of a larger bill that they passed that also talks about no knock warrants and also banning military equipment for law enforcement. And so there's some other stuff involved in that bill. It's not just the eliminating the immunity that's involved in that. But they also passed the I'm having my own Biden moment. But they were also
HR1?
Yeah, that's it. The HR1. Yeah,
Right.
HR1. That's exactly it. Yeah, and again, stated intent, and then what it actually accomplishes. And look, I've said it before. The Democrats are playing a big game, and they're playing the long game. They always do. They don't think about 6 months from now or 6 years from now. They're thinking about the next 25 and 30 years. And we've said this before on this show. That's why the illegal immigration thing is one of their goals, because that's going to increase their voting base. That's why they want to make D.C. and Puerto Rico states. That's going to increase the amount of senators they have. They're going to have four additional senators, which is going to make it almost impossible for the Republicans to ever control the Senate. So you're going to make it very difficult because because of illegal immigration into Texas. If you flip that state from a red state to a blue state, even if it's purple, you're going to make it almost impossible for a Republican to win the presidency. You're going to make it almost impossible for them to win the Senate. And now this HR, what was it? Is HR1? You bring that in, and it's going to, again, it seems like it's making it easier for people to vote, making sure you're going to give additional time to mail-in voting. You should get rid of mail-in voting. It's an invitation to scandal. You're going to make automatic registration for voting. Again, on the surface, sounds like a great idea. But how do you track people who die? There's just so much opportunity in this bill for fraud.
Yeah, I agree. And they don't call it HR1 for the regular people. They call it the For the People Act. But yeah, and that's something we need to. I'm going to set aside, sometime on our regular show next week to specifically delve into that. And I was going to bring this up when we had Carl on the last episode. Was I think the Democrats are just playing a better game because they want to rig it so, or I don't want to say rig it. They want to change it so that it's going to be next to impossible for the Republicans to, ever could have a majority to get things through what they want. But when the Republicans were in the same spot, they could have done the same things, and they didn't. They didn't act on it. So I think the Democrats, as much as I hate to say it, you said they're playing the long game, so maybe that's the better word for it, but they're playing a better game right now. But I do think that the Republican side is starting to wake up. And I think things are going to change here in 2022, especially people are really, and even the liberal-leaning news is starting to see that Joe Biden never takes any questions. He says he's going to take a question on the little Zoom meeting or whatever, and then all of a sudden the White House cuts the feed, and even they're starting to pick up on that. So they'll eat their own soon.
Trump is the one that brought this, and this is why they hated Trump so much. Not because of any of his policies, not even because of the way he talked. It was because he was a Republican that was willing to get down in the mud and play their game. No question about it. The Democrats are better at dirty politics. They just are. Look at Chicago. They're just better at it. They're better at this long game, as I refer to it as. And they stick together better than the Republicans do. When the Democrats come together, when the leader turns to the left, they turn to the left. They take 2 steps forward, they all take 2 steps forward. They are better at it than the Republicans. And Trump finally got the Republicans to understand that if you're going to beat the Democrats, sometimes you got to get in the mud and get dirty with them. And the other thing I wanted to when I said there was three things, the third one was they did pass that in the House at least. It's going to be shaky in the Senate, but in the House they did pass the relief bill, the COVID relief bill.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, did you see how much the? So if you make $80,000 a year or more, you get zero. That's it goes like from 74 to 80, you get whatever the scale is. But if you make 80 or more, you get zero. And, you know, again, we talked about even at that, even with them doing away with the bridge to nowhere or the tunnel to wherever, Nancy's house, we're still at less than.
They didn't get rid of it. They had to get rid of it.
Right.
They were told the rules. They didn't get rid of it. They didn't volunteer it.
Okay.
And don't forget in there. I'm sorry. And don't forget in there that there's billions, hundreds of millions of dollars that are going to go to elite colleges and universities like Harvard. Harvard, for instance, has $40 billion. That's 40 billion with a B in their endowment. And they're going to get hundreds of millions of tax dollars from Joe the mechanic, Susie the nurse, Angela the doctor, you know, whatever profession you do, whatever you go and do in your 9 to 5, your tax dollars are now going to go to Harvard and Yale. That bill is a progressive wish list, and it passed on party lines. I mean, how can you spend, you know, a trillion with a T, $1.5 trillion to 1.8 trillion, whatever the final number was, because like you said, a couple things came out of the 1.9. So it's down to, I don't know, 1.7, 1.8, whatever it is. How do you spend that much without bipartisan support?
Right. They just force it through. And what did we come up with? 7%? Less than 7% actually went to stimulus checks to people to help them out?
I've heard anywhere from 5 to 9%. Because some of that stuff you can loosely interpret it as, well, that's kind of COVID related. Well, that's kind of COVID related. But if you look at stuff that's specifically for shots and for transportation, refrigeration, paying people to give the shot, like, you know, that I heard that was down to like 3 or 4%. But whatever it is, it's peanuts compared to what the entire bill is. And they thought they were, you know, we took out the bridge and we took out the train.
Okay,
yeah,
two things.
You still left about $1.5 trillion in there that we didn't need to spend. And again, considering they haven't spent the money from the last, there's still almost $1 trillion from the last stimulus under the Trump administration. So, I mean, look, we're pointing the fingers here a lot at Democrats, but don't get me wrong. Republicans love to spend money just as much as the Democrats do. They love writing checks. Republicans used to be the party of fiscal hawks. That is not the case anymore. They like to spend it less. They like to save a little bit more than the Democrats, but they're happy spending money too. But this isn't just spending money. This is kickbacks to your buddies who voted for you, who had the $10,000 a plate dinners that raise money for your campaigns. There's money going to Harvard. There's money going to Yale. There's money going to the endowments for the arts. There's money going to all the elite theaters and Smithsonian. And don't get me wrong, we need the Smithsonians and we need museums and things like that. But this COVID relief bill is not where that money should be coming from. So this is all just payback money. And the worst part about it, they try to paint it as, look what we're doing for Main Street. That's her favorite saying. Biden, he probably can't remember an address anymore, but he always used to say, oh, I only worry about is Main Street. My ass is itchy. You're not worried about Main Street. You're worried about payoffs to people who supported you.
Yeah.
But I was being literal about that. My ass literally is itchy right now.
Yeah. Oh, you're absolutely right there. So, yeah, and, you know, another thing that maybe we'll bring it up on the next show, Rand Paul's always calling for them to audit the Fed. And I think that's a good idea. But, again, that's another topic for another day. So we had our emergency.
I feel like we could do a whole show right now.
Right. I know, right. So that was our emergency broadcast system message for today. Folks, we're going to the Fat Man and myself are going to meet again on Wednesday, I think, and we're going to put together another full-length Halls of Justice program for you, and we'll see you then. Say goodbye, Fat Man.
Hey, wait. Yeah, wait a second. Before we go, I want to say thanks to Carl Bailey's visit the other day. Our numbers are way up in Western Pennsylvania in the Pittsburgh area. He's really spread the word about the show, and we're starting to see a lot of people coming up. And I actually did get a couple text messages, and people were wondering what's the best way to get our archive shows, because they really enjoyed the last one, and they want to go back and listen to some of the older shows. So what's the best way, outside of the link, what's the best way for people to listen?
So probably the best way, if you all want to go back and listen to the past shows, are to go right to the actual www website. And that's just www.hallsofjustice.com. And right across the top, there's a button that says Episodes. You click on that, and every single one of them is listed there. It has its own line and its own description, and you can click and play whatever one you want. Or if you really want to, you can go to the YouTube, and you can just search Halls of Justice. And again, everything that we do here is simultaneously uploaded to YouTube, even though we don't get credits for listens for them. But if that's where you want to go back and take a listen, then you're more than welcome to do it right there. Those are the two easiest ways.
Go ahead.
Okay.
And go ahead, finish up.
The only other way to do it is the only other way to do it is just to follow us on Facebook and scroll back through the each individual post. But those two are the best ways.
Okay, and then the best way to get notifications of new shows. I mean, obviously, anybody listening right now has Facebook, so just like the Halls of Justice page that you're listening on, and then you'll see the notifications when the new show. And I'm going to be all cool and hip right now when the new show drops.
Yeah, when the new show drops. Also, if you do the at Twitter tag is at Halls of Justice, everything we do is automatically uploaded right to Twitter. I don't do too much on Twitter, but all the podcasts, once we submit them, are automatically have nothing to do with it, uploaded right to the Twitters.
All right, the last thing I got for you. Anybody that's listened to a couple of our episodes knows that you're the tin hat guy, and I'm a little more grounded. I'm also the good-looking one, but I'm a little more grounded. I have to be convinced of these conspiracies. So take that into consideration when you hear what I'm about to say.
Gotcha.
This is not your father's Democratic Party. This is not your mother's Democratic Party. This isn't the old, Democrats that used to be pro-union and cared about the blue collar. These Democrats are elitist. They're coming after the police. They're going to come after the military and reduce the budget. They're coming after your tax dollars. They're coming after, if you have any type of success, they're coming after you. They're coming after your representation. They want to make this a one-think country. They want everybody to be in lockstep. You have to think a certain way. You have to speak a certain way. You can only read certain books. You can only play with certain toys. That's what they're doing. And I just saw a meme earlier today on Facebook. And basically, and I'll leave you with this. It said, name me the country that banned books and banned speech and was on the right side of history.
Yeah,
I'm still waiting for somebody to give me that country's name.
I saw a variation of the same thing. It says most of the time things end poorly when you start doing that. All right, folks, that does it for the Halls of Justice. If you want to shoot us an email, you got a thought, comment, or a question, it's justice, JUSTUS, at hallsofjustice.com.
You've been listening to The Halls of Justice. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Have a show idea, would like to be a guest, or just want to communicate with the show? Email us at hallsofjustice@roadrunner.com. You can also find us on Facebook. Tell all your friends. And we'll see you for a new episode next week of The Halls of Justice.